We go.
Good, thank you. Okay, so this morning I'm going to continue with a topic of certainty with care and uncertainty. Yesterday we talked a little bit, we started off with a piece that I had wrote, and I changed it this morning. So I'm going to read a little portion of it again and then bounce off of that. Forming is such a tender time in a person's development. Taking up a meditation practice is one such time. And anytime you meditate, you are coming into a forming process. We understand that in reflective meditation. Therefore, we are careful with our certainty. So, with that, I realized, we're much less careful with our uncertainty. More of that's the way it really is. That's how we talk about uncertainty. And that sounds pretty certain, does it? Doesn't it? I mean, to me, it started to sound like, oh, I'm pretty certain about that. And that, I think, gets at what we're trying to be careful with. Making the Buddhist teachings sounds like that's the way they always are, or that's the way this always is, rather than being genuinely curious about, do you see these in your experience? Do the teachings, prove themselves through your meditation practice? And by the way, just in case this isn't clear, the way we often use uncertainty is code for the Buddhist teaching of impermanence. That's really what we're trying to get at. That our lives are shifting and changing. It seems to be a fact that even science corroborates, the science of our day corroborates. In fact, the forming process may be another way of saying impermanence too. When you meditate, you're coming into a shifting and changing impermanent process. You may find some stable ground, some peace, some things calming, but you'll also find things forming and reforming and unforming and disappearing and coming back in. And you may find that some things repeat again and again in your meditation, and they feel pretty permanent. You might be able to say, see some little distinctions, or you might feel a little bit differently about those things that feel permanent, on different days. But it's hard to see the impermanence of some of our character traits, of some of our likes and dislikes. So maybe we don't need to see the impermanence of everything. When I first came to Buddhist teachings, that kind of statement would feel sacrilegious. Now it seems like one of the reasons why we lean towards talking about impermanence as uncertainty. It's really easier for me to see uncertainty in more things in my life. So I'm going to bring in another Buddhist teaching now, the teaching on doubt. And I'm bringing it in now because it's often defined as uncertainty, but it's given the opposite valence. You don't want to lean towards doubt. In fact, you want to get out of it or away from it or clear it up as quickly as possible, often, as some of the teachings are described. So in the early teachings, doubt is often considered two ways. One way as a hindrance. Doubt hinders being able to concentrate or calm down in the meditation. It hinders developing trust in your own abilities. And as a fetter, doubt shackles you to samsara by not having faith and confidence and trust in the Buddhist teachings. So you can see doubt is really considered, a no. Don't go there, or try to resolve it in the teachings. But in reflective meditation, again, like leaning, where we lean, there will be countless ways we encounter doubt and certainty. And they're both hooked up to lots of stuff. And for me, lots of stuff is code for saying doubt and certainty are conditioned. They're related, they're intertwined. Sometimes they're separate, sometimes they're absent from our experience, but more often they're on this dialectic. And, we're seeing a spectrum of doubt, of our own doubts and certainties. So I have a few more things to say about this, but it came out in a list form this morning. So I'm going to go to my list. Okay. So first, my young adult doubt in a specific God sent me seeking another spiritual path. Though it was called the lack of faith by the church, in my understanding, this kind of doubt was necessary in my growing up, part of my evolution and maturation. It wasn't until I found Buddhism that I was encouraged to make the path my own. And in reading David McMahon's book, Rethinking Meditation, I can see this as conditioned by a modern cultural emphasis of making things your own in the world, in the teaching, and not just Buddhism and spiritual teachings. So in that case, it's not solely my path, as this has been a phenomenon of our era. And yet others aren't drawn in this direction. They aren't drawn to make something their own path, and we're living in the same era. Their evolution and maturation looks quite different. And this is where that wrestle of doubt, self-doubt, and certainty, self-certainty creeps back in, about my path, their path. It can get to be a real tangle at times. 2, certainty simplifies so many things. Buddhist teachings can be simplified into lists like this. In reading the recent edition of Tricycle, it's a Buddhist magazine, there's a column titled Only Connect, showing how, that was the title, Only Connect, showing how the entire Buddhist path can be simplified into these 2 words. Now, when I read it at that time, I thought, oh yeah, I can see that at times. But other days I can't see that. So I really talk about it more like there's a time and place for simplicity, especially in our practice where we're leaning towards holding more conditions and more complexity. But I find that 2 words can encompass the entire path on some days, but not on other days. So 3, self-doubt plagued me as a teen. I couldn't make decisions to make my life, save my life. Make my life, it could be another way to say it. Especially if someone I loved disagreed with me. So now in my 60s, and yep, that's still on my mind, turning 60 this year. Little by little, that plague of self-doubt has died out. I don't see it so much anymore. It's more like a mild flu at times, and it's often surprising. I almost can forget that I ever even felt that way as a teen or a young adult. So 4, this is the last one. Certainty seems to be responsible for so many arguments and disputes, especially when we just have to let others know what is right. Knowledge, in my experience, seems to come with a kind of certainty, an intuitive certainty, a way of knowing, a sense of what is right. And it seems to me that it's more wise to restrain that certainty, to contain it until it can be brought out in a useful and kind way. And that's what I tell myself when I reflect upon my speech and interactions, because I can't always do it. And when I do it, I actually do feel like I accomplished something positive and good and on the path. Okay. I'm going to end the talk here. Thank you for listening. I think Janet's